America's favorite place to watch football is Stadium Swim. Located at the Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Catch all the biggest games at a viewing experience built for sports fans. Chill in one of our 6 pools on 3 different levels for a perfect view of our massive screen. Touchdown! Plenty of seating options from cozy day beds to private, temperature-controlled cabanas. Stadium Swim. Book your spot today at circalasvegas.com.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Archaeology Show. TAS goes behind the headlines to bring you the real stories about archaeology and the history around us. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeology Show, episode 221.
On today's show, we talk about Digesta, again, burials in Barcelona, and standing stones in France.
Let's dig a little deeper, but stop when you get to the Roman layer. That's where all the cool stuff is. All right, welcome to the show, everyone. How's it going?
Pretty good.
So you may have noticed we missed an episode for our regular listeners. For those people listening to this several years from now that have no idea when we release episodes, and you hate it when podcasters talk about that, so do I, and I'm sorry about this. But either way, lovely American Airlines lost our luggage, including our recording equipment, for 6 days.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
that was very frustrating. There was a lot of phone calls and a lot of chats. And the wrong thing still kept happening.
Yes.
Like, we just could not get them to listen to us.
They sent it to the wrong city.
Yeah.
Even after telling them several times.
Yeah.
And they sent it to the wrong city like 5 days after
They did.
They lost the luggage to begin with.
I know. We were about to drive like round trip 8 hours just to get our bags because we didn't see another option. But then we finally talked to somebody who finally sorted it out, sent it to the right place, and we got our bags yesterday. So here we are, back to recording.
I know. We didn't have to buy anything. We didn't have to resort to eating our own stomach intestines for nutrition, much like Paleo man did and old hunters. Yeah.
Right. And that might be a familiar topic because we recently just talked about this. I guess it's just a thing that's coming up a lot.
Yeah.
In the research these days. People are really starting to get into this idea.
Yeah, they are. So the article we talked about a few episodes ago was referring to something called Digesta, which is basically the partially digested and partially undigested or partially digested, however you want to look at it, like animal and plant matter, mostly plant matter usually, that is inside the intestines of, well, I guess it would be plant matter.
It is plant, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking humans.
Yeah.
We're not eating humans.
We're eating
large herbivores. Yeah. And these large animals, they just eat all day long.
Yeah.
And their intestines take a long time for that stuff to just go through.
And it's just, I feel like it's like a constant, like semi-processed, like log of grass that just keeps moving through.
I'm just calling it herbivore sushi.
Oh God, that's so gross.
You just like cut it up, put a little wasabi on it, and it's good to go.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so we talked about that as being kind of a new thing that people are talking about, or at least new in the news and research cycles. And I only pulled this article out because I didn't really know what they were talking about until I read the article. And then I started looking around, and it seems like this is starting to gain a lot of traction with theories around what people are having.
Yeah,
right?
like how they were getting the vegetable component of their diet. Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily just straightforward, man go hunt, women go forage. And like that was that. This bit of hunting could have actually contributed quite a bit of the vegetable or grass or whatever component of the diet of prehistoric people. Yeah.
This particular article is from The Conversation called Man the Hunter, ? Archaeologists' assumptions about gender roles in past humans ignore an icky but potentially crucial part of original paleo diet. So go listen to the Digesta episode. Hopefully we can link to that.
Yeah, we will link to it.
And so we're not going to really go over that again. I mean, you're eating the intestines of animals that have vegetable food matter in them. Whether or not they were doing that on purpose or they just thought, you know what, I'm hungry and I'm going to eat that. I don't care what's going on. But anyway, the big thing about this is that I'm taking from this is we're really, really, really challenging some long-held beliefs that are even partially from ethnographic evidence.
Yeah.
You know, which means people we can observe in the last couple hundred years that have been, written down. But those people weren't necessarily like full-time hunter-gatherers, right? And some of them are, but a lot of them, it's slightly different. They have some European contact. Things are a little bit different. But when you go back into the past, this idea, like you said, that women are strictly doing this and men are strictly doing this should have been stupid anyway, because nobody strictly does anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And I really, really liked one thing that this article author did. Their name is Raven Garvey, and they basically put a disclaimer at the beginning of the article, which I really liked, which is, I'll just read it. First, I want to note that this article uses women to describe people biologically equipped to experience pregnancy, while recognizing that not all people who identify as women are so equipped, and not all people so equipped identify as women.
Right.
So we have no way of knowing how people identified as far as male, female, or not, or something other back in the day. So we can purely look at what they were biologically capable of doing. And so that's what this person is doing in their article too. And I think it's really good to include that disclaimer, because we know that gender is very fluid today. And there's no reason to think that it wasn't fluid, you know, thousands of years ago, especially before we had like preconceived cultural notions that didn't really allow for gender fluidity. So that being said, we'll move on and talk about biological men and women and their roles. But I like that little disclaimer in the article. And so we're going to put it in our podcast too.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the other things I took out of this too is that they wrote was the idea of hunter-gatherers in the way that they operate came from the idea that 10,000 years ago, people were exclusively reliant on wild foods before domestication and agriculture. But I do want to point out that just because agriculture was, quote, invented by, you know, several people around the world in different places, independently invented, first in what was called the Fertile Crescent, Iran, Iraq, that area, the Middle East, what we call that now. That's where we think agriculture first developed, but it didn't necessarily spread out into other parts of the world. It did locally, for sure, but it didn't necessarily spread to like China or the Americas. It was independently developed, But either way, just because somebody discovers agriculture doesn't mean everybody's now farming. Yeah,
and it doesn't mean that they wanted to. I think even if they saw somebody doing agriculture, if a group was happy and living the way they wanted to live, then there was no reason to change that, you know? So I expect there's probably some mixing going on. Yeah, there could have been. Anyway, I don't think we need to talk really too much about this article. The author really brings some good points about the difference between biologically male and females. I do kind of want to mention that too. You read that quote from the author about how they're basically identifying male and female and what that means in the context of the article. Yeah. However, I will say that while we do not know how prehistoric peoples identified, you know, from that standpoint, I'm not sure just in that time frame they like really would have comprehended or could have identified as something else. Maybe you know what I mean? Like we have a lot of, I guess, cultural references nowadays, even for younger kids to see that, hey, you know, maybe these things that I'm feeling inside of me make me want to identify as something else, right? Make me think that that's more my personality than this is, you know, what people think I should have. But back then, you were really like part of a small group and you had very defined tasks and activities that your group was doing throughout the day. They were almost always related to survival until they started living in bigger groups where they could start relaxing the survival ethic and just going into, you know, okay, well, I'm going to trade for what I need. And now I can start thinking about other stuff, which is where that more than likely would have been a bigger thing. Like I have no doubt if you were to go back to like ancient Rome, there's definitely some people with some gender fluidity back in that time, just from the writings. For sure. I do wonder if our strict view of biological male, biological female in today's society, if that was maybe a little bit more fluid in prehistoric times, because it seems like they were societies where you just had to prove that you could be a contributing member of the group, right? Yeah. And maybe you were biologically female, but you didn't contribute to the group by having babies. Maybe you contributed by doing some other task, and that was okay, and you were accepted and part of the group, right, and that was fine, you know? We don't know if they were accepted. We don't know. Yeah. I think what it is in my head, I like to think that was a possibility, because they didn't have all this cultural and religious and other stuff dragging them down the way that people do today, and why it's such a fight for a trans person to be trans, you know? So... Well, it could have been a possibility, but I guess my point is back then is, while women can hunt and do anything a man can, there's one thing a woman can do that a man just will never be able to do, no matter what gender they think they are. Yeah. Right? I can identify as woman, but I'm not having a baby anytime soon. Yeah. Yeah. You know what I mean? Right. Like women
have babies.
Yeah.
And women, while they weren't pregnant all the time, that's been blown out of the water. But one of their responsibilities was having babies. And then nobody else could do that. So if you're like, I don't want to have babies ever again, or maybe you couldn't have babies, that would be a thing. But either it would be seen as the same thing, right? In that society.
I'm just saying I could see it. I could see your value to the society or the group being in some other way than just what you're biologically capable of doing. And that would be, I like to think it was that way. We have no way of knowing. This is all pure speculation. And actually I feel like we're like really getting away from what the article was even talking about.
I mean, maybe not though, because having this other source of nutrition did free them up.
To get back to what they're talking about is having this Digesta be part of your nutritional intake that you need in order to survive meant that maybe there weren't as many people foraging and they could do other things. So
because they said that, one of these big animals could, help have something like 20, a group of like 20 people survive on for like 4 or 5 days if that's all you ate.
Yeah.
Right. Which, what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you doing the rest of that time if you don't need to hunt or gather? Yeah.
And didn't you say there's a book you read where a hunter-gatherer group would get some kind of big game and then they would just gorge themselves essentially and laze around for a few days, right?
Yeah, the whole village would basically eat the whole thing because they had no real way to store it.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter if it was 3 o'clock in the morning, they were doing it. And then, they didn't subscribe to your usual, I'm going to be awake during the day and sleep at night kind of thing. They just did what they needed to do when they needed to do it. I mean, in general, people slept at night just because it's, you can't see and it's easier to do.
Right.
But either way, that was the book I've talked about lots of times called Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, like I said, we don't need to really go into this. Take a look at the article. There's a lot of other stuff coming out. If you see any articles that are discussing the challenging stereotypes between biologically male and females and the hunter-gatherer notion, it's more than likely related to this. Yeah, this is definitely a big part of the conversation. And you and I have talked about this a lot because it's really in a transition point right now because in the last few years, there's a lot of research coming out showing that the traditional roles for men and women, biological men and women, are not necessarily what we previously thought. And they're really rewriting that history. It's kind of cool to watch it happening right in front of your eyes, Yeah. I love that. And I think that's why it's so interesting to me and why we have talked about it so much on this podcast too. Yeah. Well, I mentioned the ancient Romans. Hopefully people in the ancient Roman societies were more accepting of this and they didn't just bury them under a street like the people we're going to talk about in the next article. Back in a minute. That was terrible.
America's favorite place to watch football is Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Catch all the biggest games at a viewing experience built for sports fans. Chill in one of their 6 pools on 3 different levels for a perfect view of their massive screen. Plenty of seating options from cozy daybeds to private, temperature-controlled cabanas. Stadium Swim. Book your spot today at circalasvegas.com.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts. Save big on new appliances at Menards. You need reliable and energy-efficient appliances to conquer the day. Menards is your one-stop shop with the largest in-stock appliances selection ready to take home today. Check out our top appliance brands including KitchenAid, Maytag, Whirlpool, Amana, and Criterion. Save big on Whirlpool appliances at Menards and check out our weekly flyer on Menards.com for more great deals. Save big money at Menards.
Welcome back to episode 221 of the Archaeology Show. I'm enjoying a fine breakfast mead as we're recording this. It's from a place called the Meeting Room in Arizona. And it is, I'm just going to read this because it's very interesting. Made with coffee blossom honey, plus, and that says single origin, locally roasted cold brew. It says, make breakfast better with this sweet little local collab. Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club. I mean, I wouldn't say it's breakfast time for us right now. It is probably earlier in the day than we would normally drink mead, but mead historically,
it's brunch, right?
Yeah, it's brunch.
Yeah.
Mead historically, we should do an article on that because, I mean, people have drank mead at many times of the day all throughout history. And it's been a pretty significant, I guess, I don't know about source of what it is, but just a significant component of people's. Again, I don't know if diet's even the right word, but something that they partake of.
Yeah, definitely. It's an old drink.
It is indeed. All right. Also old is this article, not the article itself, but what it's talking about.
Right.
This is from Newsweek, and I saw a number of these, so, find what you want. But the one we're linking to is from Newsweek, and it's called Ancient Graves with 1,500-Year-Old Human Remains Found Below City Streets. This is another CRM project, but it's in Barcelona, Spain.
It's Barcelona.
Barcelona. Yeah, that's so dumb. I just, been learning Spanish, and it's Mexican Spanish, and I just don't think they have that sort of pronunciation.
No, that's very specific
to
Spain? Barcelona. No,
Barcelona.
It's Barcelona specific, from what I understand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, the original name of that city was Barcino. Yeah, from the Romans. They named it that.
Yeah.
And it's Barcino, so maybe it's Barcino. I don't really know.
I doubt it. I think that accent developed later on, but yeah.
Oh, well. Anyway, human remains found during the refurbishment of the street called Via Laetana, one of the busiest streets in the city, have been found. They found the remains of 7 people from the Roman era.
And 2 from the late antiquity period.
Yes.
So 9 total, right?
9 total, yeah. So the Roman tombs are from the 4th and 5th centuries, they say. So 300s and 400s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then those other 2, what they call late antiquity. And, these time periods are usually local, but late antiquity in this context means the 6th and 7th centuries.
Gotcha. So that would be after the Romans.
Yeah.
In that sort of middle period before whoever moved in after that.
Yeah. Now, the Romans have been there quite some time by that point. They took over the area that is now known as Barcelona as early as about 2,000 years ago, at least officially, as far as the records are concerned.
Yep.
And they're constantly doing stuff like any big city would. They're constantly like ripping up streets and rebuilding them and doing buildings. And like any European city, there's a lot of old stuff there. So every time they start disturbing the ground, much like in, England, every time you hear some story there in London or something, ripping something up and, oh, look at this, an old tomb, an old church or something. They're doing the same thing in Barcelona.
Yeah. I mean, in cities, they do tend to just like build right on top of whatever was there previously. And in particular burials, because they're probably in the ground, right? That's where you put burials, and you just put your structures right on top of it, and there they are, preserved for 1,500 years in this case. So it's actually kind of nice that they get preserved that way rather than sort of munched up into the construction.
Yeah.
Or in this case, they were going to be, but they excavated. So, yeah.
Yeah, and when the Romans came in, I mean, I have a feeling it probably wasn't all that bad ultimately, because the Romans came in, sure, they might have come in violently, but they're like, we're here now.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You're probably going to have to learn our language if you want to communicate. But we're going to bring you roads. Yep. We're going to bring you water, sanitation.
Yep.
We're going to do all those things. And because that's what we want.
The Romans were so successful because they were often moving into areas that just didn't have like a really strong government or structure or whatever. Yeah. So it was pretty easy to just sort of bring them into the fold. And and that's another reason why the Romans were so successful is they weren't necessarily violent about it. They just sort of like came in and were like, hey, here's like all this good stuff. You're part of our empire now. And I think a lot of people just went along with it.
Yeah. Now, despite the Romans coming in and bringing all these advancements, Barcelona didn't actually become an advanced city until about 60 years ago when the Formula One track was developed.
What? Really?
Right outside town.
Seriously?
What?
That's when Barcelona became an advanced city?
Yes.
Oh, you're making that up completely. You are the worst.
Really? Yes, the modern metric in archaeology terms.
I was thinking like Vegas.
If you have a Formula One track, like Las Vegas is not officially a big city until that Formula One track gets finished this year. Gosh. So,
well, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, there were people there when the Romans got there, obviously, right? In the late 1st century, probably well before that too, prehistorically. But like I said, the Romans came in and just took control. So the graves found during this last CRM effort, and I don't think they call it CRM, but either way, were from the side of the Via Laetana in a plaza called Placa Antoni Mura. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. This is just beyond the line of the old Roman city wall. So they were kind of outside the city wall.
But they probably weren't surprised at all to find Roman era remains there, though, right?
They weren't. And that's because there was actually a big tomb of a really important person near there already. And I guess what was expected for this time frame, and maybe just the culture at the time, is you could expect to be tombs to be found around that. Right. So you got this big tomb where somebody important was buried, and then around that, I don't know, maybe other family members or people, and I don't think they were in Egyptian style, like killed as sacrifices and then buried with them, but it was probably just, buried around them. Yeah. So you've got the one central one and then the ones around that. And it makes sense to be outside the city.
Yeah, and people like to be buried near important figures, I guess, especially back in that time.
If they can.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
You can't just bury anybody there.
Right.
This excavation is in advance of what they call a refurbishment that will see the installation of flower beds and trees. And I'm like, oh, that's
lovely.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, you're disturbing all these graves for that. That would never happen in this country. But
did they say, are they pulling the graves out and relocating them?
Oh, yeah. Everything's being pulled out. It's a CRM project.
Yeah. But are they relocating them to like a churchyard or something?
Well, I don't think they're just going to dump them in the trash. Yeah. So they're probably being relocated to somewhere. My guess would be a museum in this case.
Oh,
because
maybe.
Nobody... unlike the United States, there isn't a current population of people that claims this ancestry to graves that are that old. Right. They may actually be ancestral remains to some people that currently live in Barcelona. Why not? Yeah. But it's a different cultural attitude towards that kind of stuff. And there's usually not somebody voicing an opinion and saying something about that.
I was just thinking, I know Native American graves have a very different direction that things go when they're excavating them in this country. But I was on a cemetery excavation in New Jersey, which was just like a Baptist church or something like that. And the church was still there and still standing and still had a congregation. And so when we were excavating, or when this excavation began, the church and the CRM company and also the construction firm all got together and negotiated that any remains we found would be reinterred in a graveyard area associated with that church. I don't know if it was actually on those grounds or if it was somewhere nearby. So that's why I was curious, because the church really got involved and was like, look, if you're going to dig up this property that has graves that we know belong to our past, congregationists, then you're going to reinter them someplace that we choose. And they managed to negotiate that.
And again, that's literally the exact same reason that Native Americans in this country basically have created laws and control the process where their ancestral remains are controlled. The big difference being, with a lot of historic remains, I would say the non-Native American cultures of this country, with the historic remains, unless there's somebody that's literally there of ancestral descent, like it's a great grandkid that knows that grave is there, they know something's coming in, they're going to want their ancestral remains taken care of, right? Yeah. Or if the church is still there in your case, they're like, well, this is our congregation, we want something done with this. But if the church had been long gone, and nobody knew what was going on,
speak for the remains.
A good example of that is an old cemetery in the University of Georgia at Athens campus. And for several years, and I don't know what's going on now because this was 20 years ago, well, 15 years ago. Yeah. But for several years, the shallow geophysics class, of which I took, was the last class I took in grad school, is over the summer, and they were using different different non-invasive subsurface analytical techniques like ground penetrating radar, magnetometry, other stuff, to basically map out this cemetery, because it was so old that part of it that was on kind of a little hill that didn't used to be a hill, they cut in a road decades and decades ago. And the cemetery's up to several hundred years old, right? Because the campus is the oldest public university campus, I believe, in the country.
That is not accurate.
I think
the charter was granted to the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill before Athens.
Listen, just because you applied for your business license early doesn't mean you build a building.
We can have that argument another time. All my Chapel Hill people, please speak up now. Send your notes to Chris and tell him he's wrong. Anyway, go on.
Anyway, the church is not there anymore. It's surrounded by university buildings. It's incredibly valuable property because they just want to put another building on it. And I'd imagine at some point, if it hasn't been done already, that cemetery is going to be gone. But there's nobody to fight it.
Yeah, there's no church left that it's associated with or anything. It's
not that I'm aware of.
All just gone.
Yeah. We were just looking at it because a lot of the graves don't have headstones anymore, but there's clear depressions.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like, where the graves are when you look at them. In some cases.
Do the students just walking around campus know that that's what that is there? Is it labeled in any way?
There's upright headstones too.
Oh, there are some. Yeah. Okay, so know it's a graveyard when you walk by.
It's in kind of an area where I don't get I get the impression not a lot of people actually walk. It's kind of behind some other buildings.
Yeah.
It's not like in a central area. I didn't even know it was there until I took the class.
Yeah.
And I'd been on campus for a year. So, but like most campuses, I mean, you go to the 3 buildings you go to.
Yeah.
And you don't go anywhere else.
Right, totally.
So anyway, they found a lot of other stuff associated with this, including walls from the Roman, medieval, and modern periods. And they also found a well from the 18th and 19th centuries and some food preserved in silos from the 9th and 10th centuries.
Okay, so there's a range of stuff going on.
Yeah.
They really, truly just like piled on as they built the city, right?
Yeah, that's how it's going on. It's just...
Yeah, that's how those ancient cities are.
But I always wonder, though, like you see these layers and you see that things are under these, like we discussed. But how does that happen when something is continuously inhabited? Do you really just put a bunch of dirt on top of it? Like, that seems weird.
Maybe.
We don't do that now.
No, well, because we need foundations to go all the way down below the surface.
We build big buildings.
Yeah, so you have to sort of dig out. But they were mostly just putting up into a certain point, they would build right on the surface. So yeah, you could just like mow it down.
But how does something like that just get buried? Like, I'm wondering about this tomb and the other tombs around it that they found. Like, people lived there. How did these things just get into such either disrepair that it was just covered and eventually nobody knew it was there, or they intentionally covered it, not wanting to deal with it, which is a possibility. But I just don't know if we have records about that kind of thing. So
yeah,
it's always strange to me.
It is. I know. I wish I could see sort of the linear development of the layers of a city, because how does it go from having a graveyard to a structure to a different structure to maybe the structure's gone? What does that path look like? Yeah, because how does it happen? It's interesting.
Well, either way, while Europeans might not get all up in arms about burials being found, try to put a hardware store where a bunch of stones were and they're going to have your head. We'll talk about that in a minute.
America's favorite place to watch football is Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Catch all the biggest games at a viewing experience built for sports fans. Chill in one of their 6 pools on 3 different levels for a perfect view of their massive screen. Plenty of seating options from cozy daybeds to private, temperature-controlled cabanas. Stadium Swim. Book your spot today at circalasvegas.com.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Welcome back to episode 221 of the Archaeology Show.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was like the most arrogant in the entire world.
There was a lot wrapped up in that.
There was a lot.
All right. So there was a couple articles floating around, but it's about this thing we're going to talk about here. But it seemed like the original press release on this was from an outfit called France 24. So the headline on that one is "Anger as Prehistoric Stones Destroyed for French DIY Store." And by the way, DIY store, I had to kind of what the hell is a DIY store?
Yeah.
I thought it was like a Hobby Lobby or something.
Right.
But it sounds like it's more like a Home Depot.
Yeah, okay.
It's like a hardware store.
Yeah, that makes
sense.
It's
called Mr. Bricolage.
That's a really fun name.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
Cute.
Well, it makes me think of, what was that, Selfridge?
Oh, yeah, that was a department store.
But it was a real thing, wasn't it?
It
was an HBO show, but I think it was based on reality.
That I can't say for sure.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Yeah.
But anyway, the meat of this is there were 7,000-year-old standing stones, we'll talk about that, destroyed to make way for this hardware store. There were 37 stones in total, all about 2 feet and 3 feet in height. It said about a half a meter to a meter, so don't take me to task on that. I know 2 feet's more than half a meter, but it's close.
Yeah.
So anyway, 3 feet is about a meter. It's it's just under.
Yep.
So anyway, They were destroyed for construction of this outlet. Now, a lot of the information in some of these are coming from an amateur archaeologist who has a blog.
Oh, that word amateur.
I know.
You can't ever trust it, but okay, go on.
His name is Christian Oblitz. And he said the site was on the French National Archaeological Map since 2015. And it was also listed on the town's official list of local megaliths. First off, I want to live in a town that even has an official list of local
How
megaliths.
many do they have? That's crazy.
Yeah. The town is called Carnac, and it's in Brittany, a region of northwestern France.
Okay,
we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah.
The gentleman says that I don't know who they is, but somebody was planning to submit the site to France's Ministry of Culture in order to list it as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This one in particular.
Okay.
Which, that's the only thing, if true, kind of brings this into a little bit sharper focus, because
it does.
Yeah, because here's the thing. This area, well, Carnac in particular, is famous for what they call menhir, and that's what these standing stones are.
That's the name for the single standing stone.
It's like the local name,
basically.
a menhir.
Yeah.
menhir. And there are 3 general alignments. And anytime you talk about stones or things like that aren't like a building,
stones,
it's generally an alignment. It doesn't even, in this country, it doesn't even have to be upright, right? Because we've seen stone alignments that were just a couple of alignments that might point to a distant hill where there's a cairn or something.
Yeah, good point.
So anyway, they call them, and I don't know, there was no definition of what these mean, but Menec, Kermario, and Kurleskin.
Yes.
Those are the 3 general alignments of these.
Yeah. And that is the almost 40 stones that were destroyed created those 3 alignments, or there's many, many more stones than those were just part of?
In general, the types of alignments that these could have in this entire area of France are called these 3 things.
Oh, I see. So there's patterns that are common. Okay.
Yeah. This one had its own particular alignment, which was one of those. In fact, I don't think they mention it.
Okay.
And that's just a general piece of information for this area.
Okay, got it.
So
understood.
And I guess according to, again, this guy who drives by there all the time because he lives in the area, he went by one day and they were there because he was concerned about it because they knew they were putting a department store there. And he went by the next day and they were gone.
Yeah.
So the way he wrote it, a bulldozer came in the middle of the night and covered it and cleared everything out.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's actually true, it doesn't say in the article.
And the other thing too is that according to him, the stones that they took down wouldn't even have been under the building. They would have been behind it. And with a little bit of effort, they probably could have been preserved. According to him, again.
Why would he have that information, first off? And second,
well, they might have to publicly post the plans.
Yeah, they might have to.
Yeah.
But the other thing is too, there's a lot wrapped up in a building depending on how big it is. They need to have drain off areas. They need to have storage. They need to have a parking lot,
dumpsters, all that kind of stuff.
All this kind of stuff. Yeah. And it just because it wasn't under the footprint of the building doesn't mean it wouldn't have been in danger. And it also doesn't mean they couldn't have avoided it and put up a fence.
It is kind of shocking that they were going to be that close to an ancient site. In this country, most construction will just avoid that stuff. They'll just move it a little bit this way or that way to not even have to involve themselves with it, But
just like in segment 2, I don't think that's easy in Europe.
Maybe lack of space or whatever.
I think this stuff's all over the place.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
either there's so much of it you can't avoid it, or it's such a crowded area there's not a lot of space to move. Both those things I get.
Now, the reason this might have been in the way is because of the size of it. The site itself was actually known as Chemin de Montauban, Chemin de Montauban. And it included, and again, it doesn't say which one of those 3 alignment names this is, but it included 2 intersecting rows of small granite stelae, and that's just a granite standing stone.
Another word for standing stone.
Spread over 50 meters in length. That's over 150 feet. One had been in the same place, one of the stones, they said, and not moved by somebody historically. And I'm not sure exactly how they know this. There are ways through, I want to say... not X-ray fluorescence. There's some other technique we talked about a while back.
Oh, we did, with the soil right under it.
You look under it and you can tell how long it's been since that soil was exposed to light.
Yep.
But either way, I don't know if they did this, but apparently one of them, through whatever means, had been in place for 7,000 years, which is how they dated this. So, which means that, some of them could have been in place longer. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
I don't know if it was routine for these to be set up and then maybe reconfigured by people a couple hundred years later that are like, you know what? We don't like V's anymore. We're going to make an X.
Yeah, totally. I could see people doing that. That makes sense. And,
we don't support the V gods. We now support the Q gods, and that's what we're going to make. So,
yeah, definitely.
This site is one of the oldest sets of stones in Karnak. That's another thing that made it important to the local area. Mm-hmm. So
there's about 3,000 prehistoric standing stones in Brittany that were erected by pre-Celtic people.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's not sites. That's total stones, the way they wrote the article.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
This one had 37 of them.
Yeah.
Some may have had a lot more. Some may have had fewer. Who knows?
That's still a lot, though.
It's still a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also in this area stone tombs and burial mounds. And with those and then the standing stones, it's thought to be the largest collection of these type of things in the entire world.
Like found together and probably associated.
In the highest density.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So for these types of things in Brittany, in France.
I'm just very surprised about this again, and our experience comes from CRM in this country where you can't really destroy a site without doing the proper excavation or whatever, and it makes me wonder if this guy Christian Oblitz, if he didn't know what was happening in the background. Maybe they already did the excavation that they needed to do for this site, and they had the permission to move forward with clearing it, because that is something that happens. Like you excavate and then the site has been documented.
But it sounds like the site is the standing stones. You can't excavate those. They're on the ground. They're on the surface.
No, but you can document it and say this has been documented fully, and now it does not need to be preserved anymore.
Which I don't think has happened. And the reason for that is, well, it was documented in the fact that it's listed on their historic registers or their megalithic registers, right? So it has been documented in some way. We do know that.
Yeah.
Whether or not this company that came in with the bulldozer was doing further documentation or was satisfied with that, I don't know. But the real thing to lead to your point that the end of this press release talks about is a complaint has been lodged with the public prosecutor for willful destruction of sites that relate to archaeological heritage. That's what they called it. And they say that in the complaint itself, they're not so much looking for punishment because it's been done already. Like they might fine them, of course, but what do you do?
Yeah.
But the complaint is more to find out where the loopholes are that allowed this to happen.
Like how did this happen? Yeah.
They're like, we've got laws.
Or so again, I go to my knowledge of CRM in this country, and I'm like, is this one of those scenarios where they knew they weren't supposed to do it, but they took a look at
how much the fine would be?
Yeah. Like, was the fine not enough to stop them? And they were like, whatever, we need this space. We're going to just bulldoze it. And the fine isn't enough to stop us. We'll take the fine and move on.
The development firm is like, we're losing $50,000 a day not doing this. And the fine is $40,000.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that is definitely a possibility. And we've seen that in this country too.
Yeah.
It for sure happens.
Yeah. I mean, what could happen is if you do that too many times, you lose permits to work at all.
Yeah.
But like a one-off, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Unless there's really, really strict laws, and you just don't see that.
Even if they do it often, like, there's a lot of stuff in politics that goes into those kind of things. So you grease the right wheels, Yep. Anyway, that's crazy. But
it is.
The one last thing I'll say about that is, yes, they were just a pile of stones, right? And 50 years ago, we would have looked at a pile of standing stones and been like, that's great. They've probably been there for a while, but we don't have any way of dating it or knowing anything about it.
Yeah.
But today we have all these technologies that can tell us more about those standing stones. Like you said, the one that looks through the soil and sees when the last time it was exposed to light was. And there could be future technologies coming that we don't know about yet that might tell us even more about these ancient sites. So destroying them really does hurt my archaeology heart a little bit, because you just don't know what is going to come in the future that might really enlighten the archaeology world about what those things meant. So I hate to see things destroyed like that. I also understand progress, and you have to be able to build in places. I just wish there could be a happy medium, and it sounds like that's what this guy who is reporting the complaint also wishes too.
Yeah, and that brings up the age-old question that we don't have a lot of time to talk about here is, does everything need to be preserved?
That's true.
Or is there a way to preserve it digitally, in a way that we can get rid of it? It's
so hard because we just don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
So if we,
with so many more examples in this area, it's like, decide what you want to do, and figure out how that's going to work. So I don't know.
That's hard. That's a hard question for sure.
All right. Well, to make up for the fact that we skipped an episode because we didn't have our recording equipment, thanks American Airlines for that, we're going to do a bonus segment.
Yes.
And it's going to be about an Armenian bakery with 3,000-year-old flour. So if you're a member of the Archaeology Podcast Network, head over to arcpodnet.com, click on members, and then click on click on early downloads because bonus content associated with episodes are on that episode's page. They're not in the bonus content page, which is something I might change the name of later on.
Yeah, that's bonus content page is like for a full extra episode.
Something not related.
That doesn't have a place to live.
Exactly.
These ones have a place to live with the rest of the episode.
Yeah, this is in the early downloads area, so you'll see the file for the full episode, and then you'll see the player down there for the bonus segment as well.
Right.
If you're not a member of the Archaeology Podcast Network and you've got an extra $6 or $7 a month to spend, if you buy annually, that's what it costs. Then head over to archpodnet.com/members and you can join us and get all of our past bonus content, our past extra content and episodes, and our past live events and videos that we've done. Like, for example, we just did a Culturo Share event on the archaeology of motherhood and really parenting in general, too. That was really cool. Had some really good speakers and presenters on that. And that is available to watch anytime you want on your member pages. So, and we have another one coming up that I think is shaping up to be underwater archaeology.
Ooh, exciting.
So, and I think that's going to be in August.
Cool.
So we haven't quite nailed that one down yet, but
yep.
Anyway, that's coming up in the future. So check that out, archpodnet.com/members. And one more thing, if you want to keep these podcasts coming and keep the network going, take a look down at your device that you're listening to this on and take a look at our sponsors and affiliates at the bottom of the page. I'm incredibly excited about Motion, which is the first one listed, but we have 3 others listed down there as well that are also providing some good things that we've looked at. So all of it, if you purchase stuff, helps us keep the network going and keep everything free.
For sure.
So, all right, with that, we're going to go record the bonus segment. So thanks again for the members that are allowing us to do that. And again, archpodnet.com/members if you're not a member. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Archaeology Show. Feel free to comment and view the show notes on the website at www.archpodnet.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArchPodNet. Music for this show is called I Wish You Would Look from the band Sea Hero. Again, thanks for listening and have an awesome day. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Culturo Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.